All right, welcome along to the RT Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. You can watch or listen to this podcast every week on RT.ie, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow to get notifications when new episodes go up. This week, we're going to build up to the first of Ireland's assignments in the Euro qualifier doubleheader against Sweden. We'll look ahead to the Champions League final, which is live to watch or stream on RT this Saturday. We'll talk LOI and reflect back on the FA Cup final. And to do that, I'm joined today by coach and analyst Lisa Fallon, former Sheffield Wednesday, UCD Shamrock Rovers and Northampton Town midfielder Paul Corry, and RT Sports Anthony Pyne. Hope you're all keeping well. And before we kick off into the women's internationals, Paul, you were on last week, and I think you were talking about your beloved Chelsea and this period of stability. And we're in silly season now. 2 hours later, or 3 hours, whatever it was, after we finished recording, Mauricio Pochettino has been essentially given his P45, and the club have parted ways with him.
Yeah, my little speech was null and void a couple of hours after we'd recorded, I should say. Yeah, it was mental. I was actually really shocked when I saw the news flashing across the TV screen that Pochettino had been let go. And maybe we shouldn't be too surprised with just how turbulent it's been across the club since Bowley has gone in. But I mean, most Chelsea fans would have expected that Pochettino would have been in charge at the beginning of the season, purely on the basis of how well they finished the season and the 5 consecutive wins. They went quite close in the 2 domestic competitions, and you maybe thought, okay, we're going to see a bit of stability and continuity going into the next season. Pochettino seems to know or have a better grip on what his strongest 11 is, and lo and behold, we are now looking at a situation as Chelsea fans where it looks like Maresca seems to be the favourite to take that job, and I just think that's a massive risk for somebody who hasn't got a huge amount of experience of management alone, but also never having managed in the Premier League. And it seems like a gamble, but it seems like one where they want a head coach, Chelsea. They want somebody who's going to coach the first team and deal with the media. And it seems like they believe they have everything else in position to lead the club going forward. But for me, it seems like a gamble. And maybe the lure of having worked with Guardiola, and they've seen how well that's gone for Arteta at Arsenal, maybe that's the blueprint that they see wanting to go forward. But when you have somebody with so much experience like Pochettino, it seems daft to take him out and replace him with someone with so little experience.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out anyway. I think definitely the Arsenal model is something they are looking at. I think it's been said, I think it was in The Athletic, they mentioned that. But let's turn our attentions to the women's internationals. Doubleheader against Sweden with the Aviva Stadium game on RT2 and RT Player this Friday from 7:30. And then the trip to the Friends Arena in Solna, just outside Stockholm, coming up next Tuesday. Now, first off, we're going to listen to Eileen Gleeson, and this is in regards to Katie McCabe being named in the Arsenal squad that went on a trip to Australia and match against the A-League All-Stars, which was last Friday, which is exactly a week before the first of the Sweden game. So this is just a very short clip where she's chatting to Tony O'Donoghue.
Knew this trip was coming, Tony, so we've been planning and been in a lot of communication with the club around recovery and sleep strategies for when she returns.
Eileen Gleeson there. And Anthony, can you just give us the context of this? Because this is not just coming out of the blue. This was talked about even as far back as the previous window when they were playing France and England, that this was going to happen and that Katie McCabe was going to have to be on the road, and not just on the road, but on the other side of the world just before a major fixture.
Yeah, well, the game was announced in March. Now, Katie McCabe's inclusion in the squad wasn't confirmed until closer to the match itself, but I mean, it was assumed and presumed that she would be travelling because, and I am stating the obvious here, but Katie is an absolute superstar, like a global star, a genuine global star. And look, she went. There was a couple of exclusions from the squad at the time. Serena Wiegman sort of spoke about her displeasure with the timing of the game. Obviously, this will affect not just Ireland, but every European country with your Euro 2024 qualifiers coming up. Bette Mead and Leah Williamson didn't travel with the Arsenal squad, but they have been managing their minutes. They're both coming off the back of ACL injuries. In fairness, Alessia Russo did go, for example. So I think this is just part and parcel of playing with a top club, and the benefits of this trip for Arsenal are huge in terms of the profile, commercially. And Katie is just such a huge figure for them. She's the face of that club along with others, but she's certainly one of the faces of the club. She was part of their kit launch, I think was it today or yesterday. There was a a business in football, women in football business brunch in Melbourne on the Wednesday. She spoke at that. And then in the stadium itself in Melbourne at the game, like it was full of fans with McCabe jerseys. Obviously a huge diaspora over there, a lot of Irish supporters there. But I mean, I know myself from being in Australia at the World Cup in Australia, in the run up to Ireland via Australia, like she was the name on all the Aussie journalists' lips and the other players and their coach. Because she's a star. So it's not ideal from Ireland's point of view, clearly. And Eileen spoke about it last week. They're going to take measures to try and have her in as good as physical condition as she can be. I mean, she will fly back first class. She got back to London on Sunday. She'll link up with Ireland tomorrow, which is Tuesday. They've had advice in terms of sleep patterns, and they'll make sure that she recovers as well as she possibly can. And to be honest, like, I mean, I would imagine that she probably maybe wanted to go on the trip. It's a nice thing to go to. It's a nice thing to be involved in. Now, I looked at some of the highlights of the match. I thought she'd go and play the game and maybe only play a half. I think she played the full 90 minutes.
Yeah, she played the full 90, yeah.
She played the full 90. And if you look at some of the highlights, she absolutely steams into about 50-50. Because that's Katie, that's the way she plays. She doesn't know any other way. She also would have been playing against players, representatives from the A-League All-Stars, so obviously representatives from that league in Australia who would have relished the chance to play against a world-class player, which she is, and they would have measured themselves against her. So it was a friendly, but I think it was a pretty competitive friendly. Now, thankfully, she's come back in one piece. There's no injury, certainly, that we know of. I'm sure she'll be okay. It's not absolutely ideal, but as I said, I think they're going to great lengths to make sure she comes back well rested in good nick. I don't think it will unduly affect her, to be honest. She's such a good athlete, but look, it is what it is. I think, when we speak about trying to grow the game, the women's game, and the exposure with it. I mean, it wasn't, by the way, that Newcastle and Tottenham were over there as well, weren't they? They played them. The two of them played. The men's team played in a friendly, I think, less than a week after the Premier League campaign ended. So look, the clubs will measure the financial benefits and the exposure benefits that come with these games going the other side of the world. They're not going over there for nothing. And I guess with Katie McCabe, it just comes with the territory of being such a high-profile star.
Yeah, I suppose from an Irish perspective, Lisa, it is what it is. But maybe, as Anthony said, maybe not ideal. And considering that we're in a very, very tough Euro qualifier group, England and France already, in terms of the first games played already in the last window, but now it's the world number 6, and probably, despite being the world number 6, arguably the most realistic hope if Ireland are going to get points in this campaign.
Yeah, I think so. And look, as an international manager, the first thing you want is all of your best players available. So, that's I suppose, a game that Eileen and the backroom team are going to have to watch and be observing and hoping that it's, not going to be a costly trip. But, the management of the players is a key part of the women's game now. I mean, there's so much expertise now around, and the demands that are going to, that are on the players, especially the top players, are going to increase, and that is part of the challenge now, because as the game grows, people on these trips, they want to see the best players. So it's about managing the assets and trying to manage the player welfare. It's a big piece. But I suppose from an Ireland perspective, I think definitely once the group had been drawn, you would have identified these two games as probably Ireland's best chance. The great thing about this group is that teams are going to take points from each other. And I think that actually opens up a massive window of opportunity for Ireland. The games against Sweden in the World Cup qualifiers were really competitive. Ireland were really, really strong in those two games. The one in Dublin, I think they lost just by a single goal in OG, and over in Sweden, the 1-1 draw. And we saw a real development in the team. And I think, there's a real opportunity, particularly if you look at the Sweden squad. They're missing Stina Blackstenius, who is, their talisman, in terms of their goals. I think she scored 31 goals for Sweden. And in addition to that, the girl who would normally be her replacement, Anna Anvegard, she's also not available. And when you look at their performances in the Women's World Cup, they were really excellent, particularly strong on set plays. They scored the most number of goals from corners and free kicks in the Women's World Cup. And Amanda Illestedt, the centre back, scored of those. And Amanda Illestedt is missing also, as she's expecting her first child. So I think this is a great opportunity for Ireland, considering they're missing such key players. And I think, based on their experience, there's no mystery about playing Sweden for this group of Irish players. And I think based on the experience they had, particularly over in Sweden, they should have real confidence going into this game and take more confidence from the performances against France and England going into this game. I think there's a real opportunity for them.
And in terms of how Sweden set up, aside from the set piece threat, which you mentioned from the last World Cup, which was something that was key to them, as you mentioned, Illestedt, they looked really good against England, hitting on the break in the opening game of the Euro qualifiers. Are they the sort of team that actually prefer to sort of play that way, or do you expect them to be more comfortable, dominating possession here in Dublin and then also in the game in Solna?
I think Sweden are a really interesting team, and I think it's one of the key strengths of Peter Gerhardsson, their manager. I actually got to work with him recently after the Women's World Cup Coaches Forum, when we brought in all the coaches from the Women's World Cup and we presented back to them the findings and the trends of, what were the trends in the Women's World Cup. And he's particularly interesting in the way that he's consistently been able to reinvent this Sweden squad. Particularly, they've had to transition some really key players. And I think that's really interesting. But Sweden are a team that are technically really good. They're a very physical team as well. They have players that have both physicality and technical ability. They can dominate the ball, but they're also really organised and very tactically astute. So they're well capable of sitting in and being defensive and hitting you on the break, because, as you said, they do have players with speed and technical players who can release the ball early in terms of moments of transition. So from that perspective, they're a really interesting team. And that's why I think they've done so well, because they have that. They don't have a singular playing identity. They have different ways of playing, so they can set up different strategies for playing against different types of opposition. Do I expect them to sit in and sit back against Ireland? I don't really, but they could do. But as you say, they can build up, they can play through the thirds. They've got real high quality players. You look at a player like Fridolino Rolfo, she's playing for Barcelona, just won the Champions League. So they've got players of really high quality, and other players that are playing in the WSL as well, and at the top levels in Sweden. So, they're a high quality team. But having said that, I do think, this is a game that these are two games that Ireland can really identify as opportunities to get points. They'll have to work really hard, and you have to make sure that the key moments of the game go your way. But tactically, Sweden are a very diverse team and they're very adaptable. But I think we've seen that Ireland have also grown, a bit in that respect too recently.
Yeah, and Anthony, just in terms of the squad that was named by Eileen Gleeson last Thursday, so it's markedly the same, similar squad to what was named in the opening set of Euro qualifiers, but Niamh Fahey missing this time, and Heather Payne's absence is going to be an interesting one as well in terms of the energy she brings out on the wing and sort of wing back position.
It will. I mean, look, I don't know if we'll get a wholly different approach, whoever fills in for Heather on that side. I think there were moments of encouragement from the first two games, but to simplify it, and again, to state the obvious, the energy of the game against England changed when Megan Campbell came onto the pitch and launched that enormous throw-in. And Ireland are not blessed with loads of really creative players. They have two, Katie McCabe and Denise O'Sullivan, two fantastically technical and clever footballers. And then they have really good pros, hard-working, disciplined footballers. So what they need to try and do to get points out of any of these teams is have something, basically plant a seed of doubt. It was interesting in the England game where Megan took the throw-in and the crowd had gone a little quiet, and it changed the energy. And then she got another throw in. And by the time she took the fourth throw in, England instinctively just dropped. They retreated into their own box. And instead of launching it, she checked and she threw it to her left to Katie McCabe, who was in 15 yards of space. Now, that was the only time that happened in the game because she was shackled. Now, she started sort of left back, but she moved higher up the pitch. But England just shackled her. They knew she was the danger player. And just the point I'm making is that when you have that kind of weapon, it plants a seed of doubt. It makes teams second guess themselves. They didn't really know what to do. They just retreated and they left space. So hopefully Megan is fit and able to start because she brings that. And Ireland just have to squeeze everything they can out of those sort of situations. Find that just little different dimensions to their game. I don't know, like Heather is clearly a loss because she's always so consistent and always and excellent for Ireland. But I wouldn't be too worried about Ireland. I think they defended very well actually in the first two games. They'd be kicking themselves because of the nature of the goals that they conceded and the timing of the goals they conceded because they conceded quite early. But generally they're good without the ball generally, and they probably have that similar sort of three central defenders and the two wing backs. I'd be surprised if Eileen strays too far away from that. It's just being able to land a blow on these teams in some way creatively. As opposed to just leaning back on the ropes for 80 minutes and hoping that you're within a goal and you can nick one from a set piece or something. But like we'll see it as Lisa says, it is a big test Friday. But you do feel that if they're gonna get a result in this group, it's gonna come, Friday or Tuesday against Sweden that are missing some key players.
Yeah, and both of those games are going to be live on RT2 and the RT Player. But first off, of course, the Friday game at the Aviva Stadium, 7:30 coverage starts on both of those, either the TV or the streaming, and then the game next Tuesday as well. The Ireland men's squad is going to be named by interim manager John O'Shea tomorrow at the Sky Ireland HQ, and this is for friendlies against Portugal and Hungary. And Paul, are you expecting any real major changes or surprises? Generally, it seems like the pool of players that are there is exactly what's there.
Yeah, you would imagine so, Raf, and it'll just be interesting to see, I guess, who's involved, and then when it comes down to those fixtures, who actually plays, because Troy Parrott's had a good weekend, and it seems like he's had a good couple of weeks in Holland, and he seems to have picked up a bit of form and a bit of confidence in front of goal. So a nice bit of positivity and finish to his season, and that's somebody who we've been hoping would kind of come through over the last couple of years, and it's maybe taken him a little more time to really cement his feet in first team football, but seems to have found a style in Holland that probably really suits his game. And I think somebody that we mentioned last week, Jake O'Brien, fresh off the back of scoring in the cup final in France. I mean, he can't do a hell of a lot more, not just his performance on the weekend, but throughout the last 6 to 9 months, and the consistency and the level that he's shown. So maybe not too many new faces within the squad itself, but I think when it comes to the 11 that John picks, I'd say he'd be happy enough to experiment with a couple of faces and just see what the combinations are like between different personnel, because similar to what Anthony has mentioned around kind of creativity with the women's team, we're still trying to find the right balance with the men's team of when we're in our defensive shape. Yes, we want to be solid, we want to be difficult to break down, but I still think we need to do more when we have possession of the football. We need people who are willing to get on the ball and create and make things happen in the final third. So changing up the personnel and seeing what combinations work between different people is certainly something I would expect to see, and that might mean a few fresh faces in the starting 11.
And you see Adam Idah coming in also with sort of the wind in his sails. He's just scored the winner for Celtic on loan. Obviously, we don't know what his future holds in that sense, but against Rangers in a Scottish Cup final. He's in and out of the starting lineup generally for Ireland, but along with Troy Parrott, they're both coming in with a huge amount of momentum.
Yeah, I think the problem for Adam in the last while has been playing games, but also the fact that Evan Ferguson has done so well at Brighton. They're very, very similar type players. They're players that hold the ball up and then running behind and have that big physical presence that you would want from a number 9. So to fit the two of them in the same team is maybe difficult, and that's potentially why we've seen Idah play out wide at times when he's played alongside Evan Ferguson. It's probably not his natural position to play in. So Evan being out injured will obviously free up that opportunity for him, and he's had a good season at Celtic. I think the move has been really positive for him. I think going into a team that dominates games and creates chances has ultimately helped him score goals and big goals, and he must be so full of confidence after the weekend and scoring the winner in the final. So you would just hope that he would continue on that trajectory, Raf, and it just go to show you the importance of minutes at club football and giving you that springboard to then shoot up when it comes to these big international windows. So yeah, I would be shocked if he didn't lead the line. I think he has done well for Ireland when he's been in that situation. The ask would be that when chances do come by, because we don't create so many of them, he probably needs to be that little bit more clinical in front of goal. And he's shown that at Celtic over the last couple of months. You would hope that it would kind of gravitate towards the green jersey and he'd be able to do that as well. And he's certainly somebody who you can build up off because he's got such a good physical presence. He holds the ball up and you can get runners off him or in behind him. And that should help the likes of a Troy Parrott if he was to come into the team and play alongside him, or other players who are going to show energy from the middle of the pitch. So again, it's about combinations. It's about players coming in and finding those right combinations. But Adam Idah must be delighted with the loan move that he's had. And it will be interesting to see this summer whether or not he makes a move, Raf, because he's put himself in the shop window with the performance he's had over the last while.
If for sure, and definitely seems to be he's almost carrying himself with a huge amount of confidence as well, which I think is quite apparent. But we're going to touch on the men's Champions League final and build up to it. It's obviously live on RTE across different platforms. But first, the women's Champions League final, Barcelona beaten Lyon 2-0 in Bilbao. It looked like a great occasion, Lisa, and also I suppose with Spanish football within the women's game sort of at its peak at the moment, and Barcelona also enjoying huge success on the European stage over the last number of years, both things seem to feed into each other.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting, actually. You know, one of the pieces of work that we've done recently is actually looking at, you know, the physical outputs of the players in Spain's teams across the last 3 World Cups. And what's been really interesting is, you know, how the incline has, you know, how consistent the incline has been. And that ties in with the professionalization of the game in Spain. You know, the physical output of the players, their technique, and then their dominance. So you look at Spain as a world force now in women's football. You know, they're the current reigning women's under-17 European champions, world champions, under-20 world champions, and senior women's world champions. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for looking at the game. And now Barcelona beginning to dominate and really probably taking the mantle from Lyon, who were the dominant force in women's European football for so long. You definitely feel there's a changing of the guard there now, particularly with this one. And that's quite interesting, and that puts pressure then on the teams in the other leagues, and obviously now, you know, Lyon will probably lose. It looks like they're going to lose Sonia Bompastar, who looks like she's going to be named as the new Chelsea head coach to replace Emma Hayes. So, you know, there's the women's game is becoming really ultra competitive now, and you know the margins between the players at the top level are getting smaller. But you know the gap maybe between the top level and the levels that are, you really have to work hard and invest to keep up with the top level now. And Spanish football is certainly the leading light in the women's game at the moment.
Yeah, and in the men's Champions League final, one Spanish team, of course, in it, Real Madrid, and they're playing Borussia Dortmund. So it's going to be live on RT2 and the RT Player from 7:15 on Saturday, and definitely looking forward to it. And I suppose, Anthony, I suppose Dortmund are not, they're not minnows by any means, but there is that sort of underdog versus giants thing still going on in this final.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I think like anyone who watched the semi-finals as well, if they watched Dortmund's semi-finals against PSG, they rolled their luck. I think it's safe to say that. There's shades. I think I'm sure it's been mentioned already, but there's kind of shades around Liverpool 2005 with this Dortmund team that they haven't had a good league campaign, and you look at them, they've actually probably regressed. They should have won the league. They should have won the Bundesliga last year. If you remember that,
I don't like using the term bottled, but they did bottle it on the final day. Yeah.
So, you know, like if you remove this European Cup run that they've been on, you would say they've gone backwards. Lost Jude Bellingham, of course, but that's football. These things can happen, and you never know. Like when Liverpool bet AC Milan in that final, there's just no way they should have won that Champions League. They came fifth in the Premier League that season, and within that campaign, they had some shocking results, you know, and Dortmund are kind of similar. I think they lost 3-0 to Mainz in their last game in the league. They've often looked ordinary. and quite leaky. And yet, you look, in fairness, they got through against PSG because of some incredibly resolute defending and some really good defending. But they did have to ride their luck. And PSG hit the woodwork 4 times, I think, was it, in the second leg of the semi-final. So all logic points to a 15th European Cup for Real Madrid. But you never know. You never know, Raf. We all love a good underdog. But they certainly are that. There's no question.
Yeah, and I suppose, Paul, this is their 3rd Champions League final as a club. Obviously, the first one they played Juventus and what was a great Juventus team in '97 and won, and probably were underdogs to an extent on that occasion, despite having some great players. They lost in 2013 then, but I suppose this time at least they know what the template is in terms of having to sit back.
Yeah, it is, and they did that quite well when they came up against Paris Saint-Germain in the semi-final. I think what's very important for Dortmund, Raf, is that they don't go behind in this game, because if they go behind, well, then they're probably going to have to come out of their shape, and maybe then you expose the likes of Hummels, who's a little further on in his career and maybe not got the same sort of pace. You're exposing him to the likes of Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr., and they can just tear you apart. So I think as long as they stay within the game and don't go behind, you got to give them a chance. Hummels and Schlotterbeck against Paris Saint-Germain were absolutely brilliant over the course of the 2 legs, and as was Emre Can and Sabitzer, who protected in front of the back 4. So there's a real, they work as a unit. You can see that within the games that they play. There's no sort of mega superstars within this squad. It is all about the team, and it's all about the unit and being dogged and difficult to play against. And then with the likes of Adeyemi and Sancho on the break, they have caused teams problems. Now, Anthony is spot on in saying they rode their luck in the semi-final, and they've probably had a bit of an easier route through to the final than Real Madrid. But you still have to give them some form of chance. And I believe as long as they can kind of stay in that game, they do have a chance. But I think if they go behind against that Real Madrid team, just with the quality that they have, the experience of playing in these big occasions, it's not one where a Toni Kroos or a Rudiger or Courtois is going to get phased by. They've been here so many times. They know what it takes to get over the line. And you would have to say, with the difference in quality between the 2 11s, if Real Madrid show up and play to their full potential, it's very, very hard to see past a Real Madrid win. But keeping the game tight for Dortmund is an absolute must.
Yeah, and I suppose, Lisa, from a Real Madrid point of view, I mean, obviously all the players are recognisable. Toni Kroos, who's mentioned there, that he's going to be playing his last club game and then going to Euro 2024. And they almost, in a way, you look at them in through knockout stages in the Champions League over a period of time. It doesn't really matter what teams or players they have, but they almost defy analysis in a certain way, in that they can, if they want to sit back and sort of play on the break, they'll do that. If they want to dominate possession, they can do that. And that's difficult for any team that comes up against them.
Yeah, it is. And again, like, it comes back to the point I made earlier about teams being tactically diverse and just being able to play in different ways. And that's what separates them. But then when you have a team like Real Madrid and the quality they have, they've got game changers on the pitch. So whereas, they're probably up against a team that are going to be really well organized, as Paul said, whereas Madrid really have the players that can just change the game for you. And we've seen it so many times where they haven't looked in form, they've had injuries, they've looked a little bit disjointed, and they just always seem to be able to manage to pull out the big performance on the big day. And you'd have to expect that we would see the same again this time around. But teams are becoming more successful now by being really organized. Like, if you don't have the really creative players, you can see it. Like, even in the League of Ireland, I know, like, Damien Duff has alluded to it this week, where he talked about, maybe Shelbourne not getting the credit for the way that they set up. People say they're organized and they play that type of way. But Morocco did it in the Men's World Cup, and they were incredible. And teams, there's that old cliche, isn't it? Goals win games and clean sheets win trophies. And if you can set up your stall, and I'm transcending now into the League of Ireland a little bit here, but Galway United are doing exactly the same thing. If they win their 2 games in hand, they're going to be second in the table, and they're a team that are really well structured, like Shelbourne, really well organised out of defence. And I've said it before, I think teams don't often get enough credit for being really good defensively, because that's, if you can defend really well, that's the platform upon which you can build your team to win a game. The harder you are to break down, the opposition team relies on having creative players, unless they can catch you on the break or with the set play. So I think the game is if you don't have the luxury of having the best players in the world, you have to find systems to get the best out of the players that you've got available. And I think, but Real Madrid and the top teams like Real Madrid, Manchester City, these top teams, they are masters and they have the ability to do it because they've got players who can create those moments of magic, disturb defenses, distort the organization, and that's what sets them apart. So, when they've got that type of quality in their team, you always have to fancy them.
Yeah, for sure. So Real Madrid against Borussia Dortmund live on RT2 and the RT Player from 7:15 on Saturday. And League of Ireland was mentioned there, so we're going to turn our attentions to that. Obviously, Thursday first, Waterford coming from 2-0 down to beat Drogheda 4-2. Padraig Amon scoring a hat-trick there. Galway United beating Dundalk 2-0. Bowes and St. Pat's sharing the spoils at Dalymount Park 2-2 there. Derry City and Sligo Rovers also 2 each. And then Shelbourne beating Shamrock Rovers 2-0 at Tallaght Stadium in a real statement. But let's listen to Damien Duff, who's mentioned earlier, and also Stephen Bradley, both speaking to Tony O'Donoghue after that 2-0 win for Shelbourne.
Damien, at the end of the game, I could see you were trying to play it down to the Shelbourne crowd, and I can imagine this interview you're going to try and play it down as well. But a victory against the champions at their place, it's a big statement, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. I'm not going to lie to you, Tony. I think the last time we beat Rovers away was 2005, so it's a big statement, a big scalp. But here, if I get carried away, it gives the green light for everybody to get carried away. So the fans, everybody outside the dressing room can get as carried away as they want, get really excited, but myself and the players and the staff are very calm, and we're not going to come away from what we're all about, and that's just working hard.
You didn't start Sean Boyd despite the fact that he had 4 and 4, and yet you were very direct. I mean, the likes of Jarvis and Smith playing through the middle a lot of the time.
Yeah, listen, they press really hard, they press aggressively forward, so at times you mightn't have a pass and you end up going long, but again, I think the proof is in the scoreline that who we picked and how we played was the correct way. So Sean came on, but no, the guys, like I said before the game, it was the correct team and they deserved to start.
Jarvis on Monday in Shakor didn't look like he might be able to make it on Friday, but he recovered pretty well and had a huge contribution tonight.
Massive. Here's a tough Yorkshire man, didn't want to wear a mask. So yeah, adopted by Shelbourne, adopted by Dublin. He loves it here, we love him. Special player, he affects games and win games.
Now, the crowd loved it, obviously. Top of the league, you're 9 points clear of Rovers now, 6 points at Derry. The other results tonight kind of went for you a bit as well.
They did, yeah, but here I'm not getting carried away, Tony. There's 6 points on the board next weekend, Friday, Monday. There can be big swings. You come off in this league for a week or two and we could easily be 4th or 5th. So I've told the guys to go relax for the weekend, recover, but we bounce into Monday.
Stephen, clearly you'll be disappointed with the defeat, but the number of injuries again that has blighted you this season, it's extraordinary to lose Cleary, Honohan and Clark all in the first half.
Yeah, Dan's doesn't look too good. Trevor's more precautionary. I think Trevor will be okay. And Josh is just one of them things. He's a clash of heads. He felt obviously dizzy when he got up, and the medics can't take any chance in that regard. So we understand that. But look, we're getting bodies back. It's fine. It's just another challenge that's been thrown at us. We face different challenges throughout the years. Winning's not easy. Winning leagues is not easy, and these players know that. They've faced different challenges throughout the years, and this one's thrown at us, and they'll face it head on.
How disappointed were you though with the first goal in particular, a penalty and such an easy route one?
Yeah, it was basic, like I said, for the first 30 minutes we were brilliant. We should have been 2 up, 3 up, we were really good, controlled the game. And then we make an error you wouldn't see in the under-10s game, the ball's on your head, hit the ball, and for some reason he's only learning, he ducked and they get
this
a
penalty.
This was Honohan. Yeah, Josh, he's been brilliant for us. But he makes a basic error there. He ducks and he shouldn't duck. Like you said, it's one ball and they end up getting penalty, which is really disappointing.
How worried are you? We've over half the season gone now.
No, I think when you look at tonight's performance, a lot of it was really, really good. A lot of it was really good. First 30 was really good. Last 35 was really good. Yeah, Dylan and Richie were passed yesterday fit. So they'll be back for next week, which is good. Hopefully Sean and Gary aren't too far away. So, no, we'll be fine. Like I said, I trust this group. I know what they do. They know what to do, more importantly. And we just need to stay focused.
All right, so that is Stephen Bradley there, and before that, Damien Duff. And I suppose, Paul, on this game, first, from Bradley's point of view, he never really deviates in terms of his post-match comments, and he generally always sticks to that mantra of he trusts the squad and they'll be fine. First off, do you see a lot of concerns? And then B, from the other side, this is Shelbourne's third head-to-head with Shamrock Rovers this season, and arguably their most impressive performance in a way. And just how dangerous do you see them on the break, especially Matty Smith and Will Jarvis, and how they troubled that Shamrock Rovers defence?
Yeah, I think to start with Rovers, Raf, I think the worry there is the number of games that they're losing. They've already lost more games this season than they did in the whole of last year. So I think that has to be a concern for Stephen Bradley. And I think it's actually coming down to margins. He mentioned there around the first 30 minutes they were quite good, and I would tend to agree with them. They had two really big chances. One from Trevor Clark. It was a ball that was swung in from Ferrugia, and Trevor hits the post. And then there's another one about 2 or 3 minutes later where Graham Burke goes down the left-hand side, whips it across. And Johnny Kenny, for me, needs to score. He just doesn't get enough contact on the ball. He gets there, but just doesn't put it away. And when you're playing against teams like Shels and when you're creating chances like that, you probably need to take one of them, and it becomes a very different game. And it was from the resulting goal kick that Honohan makes that mistake and Shels go one ahead. And we've seen with Shelbourne throughout this season how good they are. Every game they've gone ahead in, Raf, they've ended up winning. So it'll give you an idea and a snapshot into how well set up they are. We keep going on about it week in, week out, but the fact that they've won every game once they've gone ahead would show you how well that they are drilled. And I thought the selection that Damien Duff made was brilliant. I think a lot of people would have started with Sean Boyd, just given the run of form that he's in, and absolutely would have been merited if had he gone with that. But I think the combination of Matty Smith and Jarvis, when you're playing against Shamrock Rovers and they're going to control so much of the possession, those transitions are massive. You saw Jarvis getting in for the penalty, and then even the second goal when Pyne gives the ball away, they're so quick to get on top of you, and they were very good when they got into that final third. So it was a flawless performance for Shels up until the red card. Once they went down to once Shamrock Rovers went down to 10 men, I'm sure he would have rather they play with a bit more control and kept possession of the ball a bit more. But other than that, I mean, it was a really, really strong performance. And it was a game I was going to wondering, will they settle for a draw, just get out of here and be happy to maintain the gap? But the fact that they went there and won is a massive statement for me. And for Shell's potential to go on and win this league. But for Shamrock Rovers, it's all about getting bodies back, Raf. Some of the bodies that have come back from injuries have looked really sluggish over the last 2 games that I've been at. Definitely need minutes under their belt to get up to speed. And then you desperately need the likes of Dylan Watts, Gary O'Neill, Lee Gray, Sean Hoare back in, because the central of the pitch doesn't seem to be functioning like it has done in previous years. It's a big ask for the likes of Darren Nugent to come in and Marcus Pyne, who's been there for one season, to kind of pick up the mantle of what Watson and O'Neill have done for so long. Not only do they give great protection to the back four, but I think they give an element of control to how Shamrock Rovers play. And some of that control goes out of the team when they're not there. And once they get those bodies back, like Damien Duff has mentioned, you could see them going on a run, but it's just whether or not they can get them all back and all back together, because injuries is something that Shamrock Rovers have a lot of. And getting players back up to speed might take a bit of time. But they're still, for me, the team that will push Shels all the way. But for Damien Duff and his side, I mean, they deserve every bit of credit that they're getting at the moment.
Yeah, and it'd be double delight as well, because Derry City, the other team that are sort of in that mix, then held to a 2-2 draw by what was a vulnerable Sligo Rovers team coming in off the back of a heavy enough 3-0 defeat to Bowes the previous week, Paul. I mean, Derry, when we look at the goals, I imagine they'll be hugely disappointed. Not so much maybe even with Reece Hutchinson's one, which sort of loops over the goalkeeper, but the second goal and the way they let Sligo sort of retake the lead will stick in the craw a little bit.
Yeah, well, and Derry have been really good at home. We were chatting last season of the number of points that they were dropping on the AstroTurf pitch, and we were saying it wasn't really conducive with their game. They've actually been really good at home, other than maybe conceding late against Shels, and then this result against Sligo on Friday. Rory Higgins will be delighted with the home form, but yeah, it will hurt on the basis of how poor the goals were to give away. The first one, I'm not really sure what happens, whether Brian Maher gets his positioning wrong or if it's just complete fluke. It's probably a goalkeeper to talk you through that one. But the second one, Brian has a really easy ball out to his left full that he can play, and he tries to overcomplicate the game and thread one through what was a very congested middle of the park, and just gifts like a second to put them ahead again. And they're probably mistakes that you can't really afford at this moment in time. Heading into the season, it would have all been probably about finishing ahead of Shamrock Rovers. Now they need to latch on to Shelbourne as well, and their home form is going to be pivotal. So it definitely is 2 points drop from that perspective. And I was only singing Brian's praises when I was at the game last week. I think he's fantastic with his feet, and he definitely gives Derry an edge from his ability to kind of play out from the back and pick people out. But sometimes keepers maybe want to be overly involved in the game, and it felt like that was a situation where Brian has maybe wanted to just try something that's not necessary at that moment. So it will hurt. It's something that he'll need to bounce back from. But for Derry, it's 2 massive points drop. To go behind twice in that game will have hurt Rory, because that was an opportunity for Derry to even increase their gap on Shamrock Rovers and, you know, keep a little closer to Shelbourne. So yeah, it will hurt. There's probably been a couple of points that they've dropped in the last couple of weeks, but they are still going pretty strong, Raf.
Yeah, not overcomplicating the game. Galway United 2-0 at home to Dundalk, and 2 set-piece goals as well. Ross Monroe, OG, in terms of when he was trying to punch it out, went in the wrong direction, and then Maurice Nugent with the second. Lisa, you already mentioned, you know, the way Galway approach things in terms of their I suppose their attack and defensive side, and it's really paying off this season. You were there firsthand and sort of, I suppose, worked on that yourself with John Caulfield at the beginning of that process through the first division, and of course it's bearing fruit now in the Premier Division. How is this drilled down? I suppose drill is the right word, I suppose, in one way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, even you look back to John's team with Cork City, you know, back, oh God, how many years ago? 5, 6, 7 years ago now. But, you know, the teams are always super fit. They're always, there's a long running joke, like you come in and you can be fit, or you can be John Caulfield fit, and they're 2 different standards. And anyone who's been through a pre-season, you know, under John will understand what that means. But you know, certainly the organisation of the team is first and foremost, the work ethic, generally no egos in the team. And, you know, set pieces were always a key strength, largely because of, you know, the way that the team would play and that the attributes. But if you've got players who can deliver a really good set play, a good ball in, and you've got players in there who have the aggression and the discipline and you know, working on the setups, the timings, the starting positions, you know, making sure that lads are getting their blocks in and all that kind of stuff. You know, set plays have always been a key feature of John's teams. And, you know, Galway last year, you know, when you think about the transition that Galway have had to make this year in terms of how free-flowing they were last year, the dominance of the first division, I mean, the utter dominance of it, probably in the 3rd year of the, you know, going full time, they really were a league apart, you know, from other teams, particularly with the late goals. They could wear teams down and be really strong in that final quarter of the game. And this year that they've had to change that mindset, where they're much more, you know, they're more organised, they are more defensive. You know, they take care of the ball, concede possession a bit more. And even just that mindset of being so free-flowing in attack last year, and then having to change that mindset to be just so dogged in defending this year. And, you know, to be fair, they've created some good chances in games, and probably, particularly in their early games, they probably could have had a few more goals on the board had they just had a little bit more quality, you know, in the final third. But, you know, the thing about teams like that, and you know, having worked in the League of Ireland, and Damien alluded to it there in his interview, is that teams that can just put together a run of a few games, they're the teams that, like, everything can change if you can string 3-4 results to, you know, wins together. And generally, any team, if you can just be there or thereabouts and be in the mix for the start of the last round of games, a team that puts a run together in the last round of games will be in contention to win the league. And that's why Damien was really interesting, because he's already thinking about that. He knows that, you know, in the space of 7 days, you can drop your position and you can, you know, drop 6 points. So you have to be consistently picking up points. And you can see now teams are taking points off each other all over the place. And that kind of thing will suit the Waterfords and the Galways in the, you know, no one's talking about Galway and Waterford. And you look at the position that they're both in. You know, Waterford came from, I think, a couple of goals down the other day and turned it into a 4-2 win. And, you know, teams having that mental resilience to keep going in games and working hard and just digging in. And I actually, be honest, I think we haven't seen that from some of the top teams this year, that resilience, that ability to just dig in and grind out results. And maybe some of the top players in the league haven't really showed up and shown their class this year because, you know, I think the teams that are probably doing the best at the moment, when you look at Shels, Galway, Waterford, if either of those two teams can win their games in hand, you know, there's no stars in any of those three teams. They're pure team work, built on hard work, hard graft, resilience, digging in, fitness, and taking your chances as and when they come. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating this year. I think it's really unpredictable at this stage. And I think any team that can put together a bit of a run, I tell you, we could see surprises in the top 3-4 positions in the league this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we were surprised.
Yeah, it's certainly looking like that at the moment. And then in the opposite dugout, Paul, John Daly, who recently parted ways with Pats, has now come in as Dundalk manager. Now, he was supposed to have a watching brief during the Galway game, but it seemed like he was on the bench anyway, and he was obviously taking charge. But the main thing anyway is that he has seen the scale of the task Dundalk have, you know, rooted to the bottom and trying to get out against teams that work as hard as Galway.
Yeah, we certainly haven't been short of news stories in this season. It's been so unpredictable, and Jonathan Daly going into Dundalk was probably not a move that we saw this time last week. So it's a big job. He's obviously done very well when he went into St. Pat's, and he got pretty much an immediate bounce out of that squad when he took over. But you know, I guess he would have known those players a hell of a lot better. But it's a big task. I mean, Lisa's made the point there around kind of Galway and Waterford and the points they've picked up. They've picked up more points, Galway and Waterford, than any other teams in the last 10 games. And they were probably two teams that we would have expected to be down and round there with Dundalk and maybe fighting to stay away from those positions. So, yeah, it's a big job for Jonathan Daly. I think you just look at the 2 goals that they conceded. I know Galway are very good from set pieces, but they were soft goals to give away. And when you're conceding soft goals, it's always going to be difficult, particularly on the road, to pick up points. But we spoke last week, some of their home form has been quite strong, kept a number of clean sheets, and that's probably where you would expect they'll get the majority of their points. But I think if you're Jonathan Daly, it's about getting back to basics. It's keeping clean sheets. It's being dogged. It's trying to graft and grind out as many results as you possibly can, and trying to claw back the likes of Drogheda and Sligo into that battle, and seeing if you can kind of latch on to them and stay with them, because what you don't want is heading into the break and you have a 6 to 9 point gap to the nearest team, or even to get away from that playoff spot. And that right now is looking like it's going to be a battle for Dundalk. Recruitment hasn't been good at the beginning of the season. It doesn't seem to have paid off. Maybe they might bring in a couple of players when that window opens. Certainly seems like they'll need 1 or 2. But Jonathan Daly has shown at Pats that he can get a bounce out of a team, and if he can get some points together, Drogheda are only 3 ahead at the moment. Confidence and momentum can change very, very quickly in this division, and if you could get a win under their belt and just pick up a bit of momentum, Oriel Park can be a difficult place to go. I'm sure that's what he'll be hoping to do.
Yeah, and then Drogheda, who obviously were leading 2-0 with one goal, which I think was one that teaches you a little bit about the football rule book in terms of you can't be offside from a goal kick, Anthony. And then Bawa with a lovely finish as well to make it 2-0. And you think, oh, they're gonna beat Waterford, and then they seem to be really vulnerable out wide, and that's where Padraig Ammon's goals come from. Obviously, he's a fox in the box, hugely experienced, but that really cost Drogheda on the day, and Waterford really exploited it.
Yeah, the wide areas are where Waterford are strong too, but it's been a terrible week for Drogheda, Raf. Like, you talk about Lisa and Paul both referencing just teams being able to string a few good results together, and how congested the table is and how competitive the division is. If Drogheda had won their last 2 games, they'd be a point behind Waterford and 3 points behind Galway. Two teams were having great seasons, but they collapsed at home to Galway United. They were 2-1 up heading into stoppage time. In the first minute of stoppage time, they were 2-1 up. They lost the game 3-2. And then they went to Waterford, 2-0 up. And up to about the 50-minute mark, I think it had been a really, really textbook away performance. And you're looking at them going, yeah, like Graham Garland made the point. Graham was on the punditry for Virgin Media. Drogheda are funny. Like, they can look very resilient in certain games, and even within games, they can look very well organized and tough to break down. But they just imploded. And I don't know, is it a psychological thing that it was such a damaging defeat for them against Galway? But as soon as that first goal went in, it was a soft goal, Almond's first goal. They fell apart. Now, they've lost, they're missing Conor Keeley, who they lost to Pats. They lost Joe Redmond to Pats the year before that. Hayden Cann has done well for them generally at centre half, but I think they're maybe missing another commanding centre half to tie things together at the back in key moments of games. And if you look at the age profile of their midfield, a lot of guys over 30, well the wrong side of 30, and they did look heavy-legged in that last half an hour in particular. So look, it's going to be. I mean, we keep saying this, how competitive that division is and how tough it is to call who's going to go down. Drogheda are now 4 points off Sligo, who are 7th, and they have Shamrock Rovers this week, so it doesn't get any easier for them. But you'd just be concerned about how much that last week is taken out of them, because that is a real energy sucker to lose games like that. Every single win is so hard earned that when you essentially throw games away, I mean, to draw them would have been bad. But to lose the two is really, really difficult to take. So Kevin Doherty has a big task on his hands to rouse that team this week and try and get, even, if they nick the draw against Shamrock Rovers, and then they've got that 2-week break where they can reset. And you never know, bring another body or two in. But if they were to take another beating, you'd start to fear for them that they could well get reeled in by Dundalk.
Yeah, and then the final Premier Division game we're going to touch on here is Bows and Pats and Dublin Derby drawn 2-2. So this for Stephen Kenny is his first point since becoming Pats manager, and after 2 defeats to what is the current top 2. But Oisin Coyne was speaking to Alan Reynolds and Stephen after the game.
Didn't start well, gave away a cheap goal, cheap penalty, and grew into the game, but thought we deserved the equaliser. I thought we were having a spell for 20 minutes where we were doing okay, and the game plan I thought was working. And then again, the goal we give away just before half time is sloppy. Second half lacked quality, but regards effort, and we made a few changes and went for it, and lucky enough to get an equaliser.
Disappointed to concede at the death, and that's twice in a few days, so that's painful for the players. Overall, it's a really good performances, the first 2 against Derry and against Shelbourne, on good technical performances. Today was just a real battle. The players had to show their quality, so I was happier today, even though we showed less technical quality than we did in the first 2, which of course I will demand, but I was happy that we were more semblance of a team today, and even though we conceded a late goal, there was certainly very visibly a more united sense of effort in terms of everyone was given 100%, no doubt about that, but you've got to do that within the framework of a unit.
All right, so Pat's manager Stephen Kenny there, and then before that, Bo's counterpart Alan Reynolds. And Paul, I suppose on this game, Derby's throw form out of the window, and that's exactly what we got here. But there was a bit of focus on Romal Palmer in the Pats team, former Manchester City academy player, would have been at Barnsley for a while as well, and then he's on loan from a Turkish club, Göztepe, at the moment, and he seemed to stand out, at least in terms of the key moments of the game for Pats, winning the penalty and then setting up Cian Kavanagh as well.
Yeah, and he had great involvement for those 2 instances, like you mentioned, showed really good energy in particular to win the penalty. And certainly somebody who you might see in the coming weeks. And Pat's made 3 changes again, and we were probably talking last week that it's going to take Stephen a while to find out those combinations and who his favourite 11 is. And maybe he might chop and change a couple of players on different weeks for different opposition, but you can kind of start to see the mould of who he's going to go with, and then trying to find the other players around that. And Palmer's maybe somebody who slots into that equation. But I mean, we spoke around Drogheda and how their results changed over the past few weeks, and it's the exact same. It could have been a really different week. We could have been here talking about a good 3 points for Pats at Dalymount Park and a well-earned draw against Shelburne last week. Unfortunately, the late goals probably gives you a little insight to where Pats are as a team. They probably just don't have that steel or confidence right now to just get themselves over the line. And they were good for portions of that game, but it comes back to the goals you're giving away. I thought for Bo's first goal was really well worked. Superb move through the middle of the pitch. But I thought the second one in particular, Akintunde picks up the ball and there's just no pressure to stop the ball coming into the box. And you give somebody that sort of space and time to pick somebody out. Akintunde's got enough quality, he can float the ball to the back post, and then Danny Grant does really well to finish it. But late goals are killing Pats at the moment. But I think there's enough within the couple of performances that we've seen, particularly against Shels and against Bows, that there's something there for Pats to build upon. Getting key players into key positions, getting the most out of them is, I'm sure, something Stephen will do. And he'll feed so much confidence into those players. But they need to start winning games, because the table doesn't look brilliant for them right now, and they need to start trying to graft out wins and pushing themselves up the table, just so they can start focusing on the rest of the season and looking up, as opposed to worrying about maybe getting clawed into that playoff position. But there was enough there for Stephen. I think he'll take merit in that performance. And for Bows, there's probably a little more grit about them in recent weeks since Reynolds gone in, and getting away from there with a point, I'm sure is something that they'll take confidence from. But going well, and that first goal, like I mentioned, if they could kind of replicate that sort of movement of the ball and through the thirds, really well worked. And if they could do that a little more often, they'd certainly become an even bigger threat going forward. But for both teams, if you'd offer them a point at the beginning of it, they probably wouldn't have been quick to turn it down.
Yeah, and in the Women's Premier Division, Shelburne beat Cork City 5-1. Peamount and DLR Waves drew 2-2. Wexford beat Treaty United 2-1. Athlone were 2-0 winners away at Sligo Rovers. And then an Eve Dawson goal separated Galway United from Shamrock Rovers at Tallaght Stadium. And I suppose briefly on this, Lisa, Galway United are the real story within the Women's Premier Division this season. And I suppose in contrast as well, then Shamrock Rovers, I mean, Galway, this is their second season as Galway United. Obviously, Galway WFC used to represent the region previously. Shamrock Rovers not long in the league either, and they're having a really difficult season on top of it as well.
Yeah, I think, Galway have been fantastic. I think the job that Phil Trill has done there has been really excellent. And, I think they've really, since they've been, brought into the club as Galway United, there's a great kind of connection to the club, and it's a very unified kind of atmosphere down there. And they're getting in some great attendances too, so the public are buying into it as well. So there's, in fairness to Galway United, I think the club probably deserves some really good credit for what they're doing with both teams at the moment. And it's a credit to everybody involved. And and they're playing some really nice football, and the confidence is high with Galway United now. You can see the players, they believe they're always going to score. They believe they're going to get the results, and that goes a long way. And they also have a game in hand over Shelburne, I think, as well. So they've certainly rattled the cage. But to be fair, we're probably talking about Galway for the last number of seasons has always been thereabouts around fourth place, and they have to kick on at some point, and this seems to be the season now where they're actually doing that. So it's great for the league, it's great for the competition, and it puts a bit of pressure now on the likes of the Dublin clubs, who probably have a little bit less travel to do, like Shelburne, Peamount, and it's like, and those teams trying to reinvent themselves. Obviously, Shelburne under new management this season. Athlone have been a great story in the last couple of seasons as well, and they're still thereabouts. But Shamrock Rovers has been, they've probably been the most disappointing team this season. This is probably the season where you'd expect them to have really kicked on. And it's very, I think they've only got 4 points from 7 games, which is, you really would expect a lot more from a club like Shamrock Rovers, and also with the team and the investment that's gone into the team. So it'll be really interesting to see, but they really have to start putting some results together and getting themselves up the table.
Yeah, and then the men's first division on Saturday, Longford Town and Cove Ramblers drew 0-0. But the day before, Athlone Town and UCD drew 2-2. Cork City still leading the way by quite a margin. 1-1 draw with Treaty United, though. Kerry, only their third ever win at League of Ireland level, 2-0 against Finn Harps. And then Bray Wanderers, 2-1 winners at Wexford. And this was their first game after Ian Ryan resigned as manager last Wednesday. And the statement that Bray Wanderers put out, they announced that Ian Ryan has decided to resign as head coach with immediate effect. The club have accepted his resignation and wish Ian the best for the future. There will be no further comment from the club at this time. And Bray currently sixth at the moment. And before we go, let's touch on the FA Cup final, because this, we've talked about shocks and how teams deal with things. Manchester United probably wouldn't, if you were to go back 10 years ago, they wouldn't want to think that a FA Cup final win over City would be described as a shock, but that's what it certainly was. I had another scoreline in mind, Anthony, but they weren't complicated at all in their approach. It was just sort of countering, using the young players in terms of Garnacho, and then I suppose Rashford is a bit more experienced, and their pace, and City just didn't deal with it well.
No, they were brilliant. They were brilliant, Raf. I think for the last couple of games of the league season, he changed the approach. And what they did was they pressed. When they lost the ball, they would press for a short burst of time. But if they didn't win it back very quickly, they just sunk back into their shape. It's like a 4-2-2-2. And it meant that they were very compact and difficult to break down. They didn't chase shadows. They just got back into that shape and challenged City to break them down. City looked tired. They looked lethargic. They were nowhere near their usual levels. But United were excellent. And they do have really talented players. They're such a strange team. When you look at some of the performances they dished out this season, you're just scratching your head. But I don't know what exactly Ten Hag has been trying to do for a lot of these games. But I think if you look at a team like Atalanta, that maybe he's going for something like that really high-octane, man-on-man sort of approach, that when it works, it looks like you've got 15 players on the pitch. But if it doesn't work, if you don't have the personnel or the energy levels to pull it off, it looks like you've got 6 players on the pitch. And we've seen that with Bielsa at Leeds before. It's a bit of a high wire act. I like you're trying to get your head around. Lisa, I'm sure, will have much more, will have proper insight on this, but it's just difficult to actually understand how they look so poor when you see how well they played on Saturday. But their approach was much more structured, much more compact without the ball. And when we've got talent like Bruno Fernandes is a world-class talent. The pass, the assist that he for Mainoo's goal, I think, unbelievable. Like eyes in the back of his head. There's not many players, even at that level of the game, that can do those kind of things. So they certainly have talent. United, they got it spot on, and they deserved it. And okay, fair enough. It might be, gone are the days when an FA Cup is just merely part of a double or a treble for Man United. But make no mistake, that was a huge win for them, huge win for the fans, and possibly save Ten Hag's job. We don't yet know, but maybe.
Yeah, just on that last point, Paul, I mean, it's a strange one, because the narrative going into the final, and I think this was from The Guardian, who had reported it, that whatever happens, win, lose or draw in the FA Cup final, that Ten Hag and Manchester United will be parting ways and they'll be going in a different direction. Obviously, they've a partially new ownership, at least on the football side of the business at the moment. But does one swallow make a summer in this sense, in terms of, like, does that trophy, is that enough to save his job, given the complete lack of consistency across the whole season, where when you look at the stats, especially how many shots that Onana would have to deal with were sort of like almost relegation standard?
I don't think so, to be honest with you. It might save him for a period of time, Raf, but I think the decision has been made that they will change Ten Hag, whether it be during the off season or at the beginning of next season, if the right man comes about. They've had plenty of opportunities since they've gone in, Radcliffe and co, to come out and back Ten Hag and say, yes, he's going to be the man who's going to lead us forward. There's been nothing but silence from them. And that would suggest to me that they see maybe the direction not being with Ten Hag. And I think it's like cup finals in particular for players. It's amazing how some of the players from Manchester United were deemed fit for an FA Cup final, but missing in weeks previous to that. And the energy and enthusiasm in some of their pressing and closing was there on the weekend, but not in previous league games. And actually, that probably makes things worse, because there's performances in those players, but Ten Hag hasn't been able to get it out of them for a long period of time. And
so they're almost choosing when to turn up and when
exactly,
not to.
yeah. It's easy to show for an FA Cup final. It's when you're playing Crystal Palace away and you get absolutely tonked that you probably learn a bit more about the players and the setup and the performance levels than you do in a once-off game against Man City. That's not to say that Ten Hag hasn't done well to get over the line in the FA Cup, and he did similarly in the Carling Cup. But I think when you reflect over the Premier League and how they finished the season in particular, it's very hard to stand over a number of those results and a number of those performances. And you would imagine if the likes of Dan Ashworth and co were coming in, he's probably going to want his own man in there to work with. Who that is, I don't really know. They were touting around with Gareth Southgate at one point, and Kieran McKenna's name has been thrown into the mix as well. It seems like they want to go for that head coach figure as well, but it would all just lead to you thinking that it's not going to be Ten Hag. And if it was to be Ten Hag, they would have come out after the game and said he's going to be our man to come forward. And Radcliffe's statement was very much about the players and the performance and the club, and there wasn't much mention of the manager. So I would say the writing is on the wall. I'd say it's just a matter of when that decision will be made.
Yeah, they'll give him at least Ten Hag a few days to actually enjoy this before, I suppose, bringing the hammer down in a sense. But I suppose a final point before we go, and that's the playoff final. So Southampton have now been promoted to the Premier League at Leeds United's expense, and a few Irish players, obviously more so on the Southampton side, with Bazunu and Will Smallbone, Ryan Manning, all part of that squad and going to the Premier League. Obviously, Bazunu out injured at the moment with an Achilles issue that'll keep him out probably till the latter end of next season, but he may get some Premier League game time, hopefully, by that stage. But wanted to focus on Russell Martin first, Lisa, and you know him quite well, and it's a great achievement for him, I suppose, as a coach.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. We did the League Manager Association's diploma in football management back in 2018, 2019, and Russ was on that course, and also Matt Gill, his number two. And the two lads, we had to do a group project, and I was in the group with the two boys, and we had to do a project on Bristol City. We had to do like a club visit and stuff like that. But two really interesting guys, and Russell is really innovative. He's quite philosophical. He's very well read. He's always looking for new ideas, but at the same time, he's also very clear about how he wants the players to play, and he wants Southampton to be an exciting attacking team. And, some of the games have been really, really enjoyable to watch. Obviously, I have a bit of a graw for the club anyway, on the fact that I played for them when I lived in England. But yeah, I think what he's done and garnered the team, and, because Southampton are one of they're a Premier League club really in their essence, because they were there for so long. So I think it was really important for them to get back up as quickly as possible. And to be fair, he's done a great job. The players love him, and he's still so young as well, And so I think he's a really interesting coach. And he's very kind of set, and he's very clear about what it is he wants to do, and not easily swayed one way or the other. And I think Southampton will be really interesting, when they go up and what he can do. So yeah, I think delighted for him, and for Matt as well, and delighted to see them back in the Premier League as well.
Yeah, and obviously commiserations to everybody who supports Leeds. Johnny McDonald, who's regularly on this podcast, did actually give that away a couple of weeks ago, that he is a Leeds United supporter, and there's loads of them in this country, obviously. So sorry to all as well. But look, that's bringing the end of the podcast here anyway. Champions League live on Saturday at 7:15 on RT2 and the RT Player. But the day before, Ireland against Sweden in the Women's Euro qualifier. So that's Friday from 7:30, RT2, RT Player. Lisa Fallon, thanks very much for your time. Anthony Pyne and Paul Corry.
Thanks, Raf.
Thanks, Raf.